They didn't just mess with my business. They tried to choke it out, quietly, legally, like it was nothing. And the craziest part? They thought I'd just roll over and pay up like everyone else probably did. Yeah, that didn't happen. So here's what I did. I bought the entire road they tried to trap me with. But to understand why that even became an option, you gotta see how ugly this got first. My name's Aaron. Been running a small auto repair shop just outside a quiet stretch of highway near Spokane for about 17 years now. Nothing flashy, just honest work, 8 guys on payroll, steady flow of cars every week. The kind of place where people know your name and trust you not to screw them over. I built that shop from scratch, literally started with a rented garage and one toolbox, and slowly grew it into something stable, something real. Problem is, the shop sits back off the highway, about a quarter-mile in, and the only way in or out is this narrow gravel road that cuts across someone else's land. Yeah, not ideal, I know, but for years it wasn't an issue. The land belonged to this older guy named Mr. Holloway, retired, lived out of state most of the time, barely came around. We had what you'd call a handshake deal. Real simple. I keep the road maintained, fill the potholes, make sure it's drivable year-round, and in return, I get to use it. No paperwork, no drama, just mutual understanding, the kind of old-school agreement that actually meant something back then. And for nearly 2 decades, it worked perfectly. Then he passed away. And that's when everything started to unravel. A few weeks later, this guy shows up, Evan Holloway, the nephew. Early 30s, tech money, sharp haircut, driving a brand new electric SUV like he just stepped out of a startup pitch meeting. You know the type, smiles without warmth. I's already calculating what everything around him is worth. He pulls up right at the entrance of the road like he owns the air too, steps out with a tablet in his hand. Not paper, not even pretending to be casual. Just straight business mode from the jump. I'm Evan, he says, barely looking at me. I recently inherited this property, including this access road you've been using. No, nice to meet you. No small talk, just straight into it. I told him, yeah, your uncle and I had an arrangement. I take care of the road, I use it, been that way for years. He gives this little half smirk, not friendly, more like he just spotted a loophole. Well, he says, tapping on his tablet, that arrangement wasn't legally binding, so moving forward, we're going to need a formal easement agreement. And right there, I knew this wasn't going to be simple. I asked him what he had in mind, thinking maybe it'd be something reasonable, cover taxes or maintenance officially, something fair. He turns the screen toward me like he's presenting a deal to investors. $5,000 a month, he says, completely straight-faced. Plus you remain responsible for maintenance, liability coverage, and I'd like the road paved within 6 months to increase property value. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. It sounded so absurd I thought he was joking. He wasn't. $5,000 a month. I said, I've been maintaining that road for free for almost 20 years. He shrugs, like that history meant absolutely nothing. Then you've had a good run, he replies, calm as ever. But now it's time to formalize things. Or you can explore alternative access routes. Alternative routes. Yeah, sure. Through trees, ditches, and land I don't own. That's when it hit me. This wasn't negotiation, this was pressure. Clean, calculated pressure. I told him straight up, that's not happening. And he just nods, like he expected that. Then I suggest you reconsider quickly, he says, already turning back toward his car. Because access to this road is entirely at my discretion now. And just like that, he leaves. No yelling, no threats, just quiet control. I stood there for a minute, watching him drive off, and I had this sinking feeling in my gut, like something bad was already in motion and I was just late realizing it. So I called my attorney, Mark, good guy, been handling small business stuff for years, and I explained the situation. He pulls up the county records, starts digging into property lines, usage rights, all that. And after about an hour, he calls me back with that tone you don't want to hear. All right, he says, here's the situation. You've been using that road with permission, not under a recorded easement. I go, okay, but I've been using it openly for almost 2 decades. Doesn't that count for something? It might, he says. You could argue a prescriptive easement, but it's not automatic. You'd have to prove continuous, open, and adverse use, and even then, it's a legal fight. I pause for a second, then ask the real question. Can he block me from using it? And there's this short silence, just long enough to tell me I'm not gonna like the answer. Technically, yes. That's when everything shifted. Because now it wasn't just a disagreement, it was a ticking clock. We started preparing paperwork immediately, planning to file for legal access. But before we could even get that in front of a judge, Evan made his move. Monday morning, I pull up like usual, coffee in hand, already thinking about the day's workload, and I see it. A chain-link fence stretched across the entrance of the road, bolted into place, with a heavy-duty padlock hanging dead center like some kind of statement. I just sat there in my truck for a second, staring at it, not even fully processing. Then one of my guys pulls up behind me, confused, then another, and just like that, my entire operation is backed up on the side of the highway, locked out of our own shop. I got out, walked up to the gate, grabbed the metal, shook it solid. No warning, no notice, just shut down. I called him immediately. He answers on the second ring, like he's been waiting. You can't do this, I say, trying to keep it together. Sure I can, he replies, almost cheerful. It's private property. You're blocking access to my business. You declined my offer, he says. This is simply the consequence of that decision. I could feel my blood pressure climbing. This is extortion, I tell him. He chuckles, actually chuckles. No, he says, this is leverage. And then he hangs up. That, right there, that's the moment I realized this wasn't just about money for him. This was about control. And he thought he had it. He thought he had me cornered, landlocked, desperate, running out of options. But what he didn't realize was that he just made this personal. And once it became personal, I stopped thinking like a mechanic and started thinking like a problem solver with nothing left to lose. All right, let me pause the story right here for a second, because what just happened, that wasn't random, and it definitely wasn't new. This kind of situation plays out way more often than people think, especially when land, access, and money start overlapping in messy ways. From a legal perspective, what Evan did, it sits in that gray zone that feels wrong as hell, but isn't always immediately illegal. See, because I never had a recorded easement, nothing filed with the county, nothing officially granting me permanent access, my right to use that road was based on permission, not ownership. And permission can be revoked. Just like that. Now, yeah, there's something called a prescriptive easement, which basically means if you've used a piece of land openly, continuously, and without interruption for a long enough period, you might be able to claim legal access. But here's the catch. It's not automatic, and it doesn't protect you in real time. You still have to go to court, prove it, and until then, you're vulnerable. According to standard procedure, guys like Evan know this. They don't need to win long-term. They just need to apply enough pressure short-term to force you into a deal. Lock the gate, disrupt the business, create urgency. Suddenly that insane monthly fee doesn't sound so insane anymore. And this is where it gets interesting, because this isn't just legal, this is psychological. This is a psychological trap, classic leverage play. He wasn't just charging for access, he was betting on panic. Betting that I'd fold under pressure, choose certainty over risk, and pay whatever it took to keep my doors open. It's the same mindset you see in aggressive HOA disputes, property line conflicts, even corporate negotiations. Control the choke point, and you control the outcome. But here's the thing. That strategy only works if the other person stays reactive. And I was done reacting. So yeah, that gate going up, that was supposed to be the end of the story, at least from Evan's perspective. Lock the access, squeeze the business, wait for me to panic and sign whatever he put in front of me. Clean, efficient, predictable. The problem was, I didn't panic. Not right away anyway. I got angry first, then I got focused. Mark pushed an emergency motion through the court within 48 hours, arguing that blocking access to an active business without notice caused immediate and irreparable harm. Judge looked at it, probably saw the same thing we did. This wasn't just a property dispute. This was someone trying to weaponize access, and granted a temporary order forcing Evan to unlock the gate while the case moved forward. It wasn't a win, but it bought us time. And time was the only thing I needed. The next morning, the lock was off. But Evan? Oh, he didn't disappear. Nah, he leaned into it. Every single day, like clockwork, he'd be out there by the roadside, standing next to that fence like some self-appointed gatekeeper, phone in hand, filming my trucks coming in and out, checking timestamps, writing notes on that tablet of his like he was building a case. or maybe just trying to get under my skin. And honestly, it worked a little. Not enough to break me, but enough to remind me every single day that this wasn't over. Weeks turned into months, legal fees stacking up, stress creeping in, my guys asking questions I didn't have answers to yet, and Evan? Still circling, still waiting for me to crack. That's when Mark called me one afternoon, voice different this time, sharper, like he'd just found something. "You're not gonna believe this," he says, "but our guy? He's bleeding money." Now that got my attention. Turns out Evan wasn't just sitting on that land for fun, he had plans. Big ones. Strip mall, gas station, maybe even some mixed-use development. The kind of project that looks great on a pitch deck, but needs serious capital to actually happen. Problem was, he didn't have it. Missed property tax payments, loan applications denied, investors backing out. On paper, he owned 40 acres of potential. In reality, he was stuck holding land he couldn't afford to develop. So I asked the obvious question. How stuck are we talking? Mark didn't hesitate. Stuck enough that if someone came in with a clean cash offer, he'd have to listen. And right there, everything shifted. Because up until that moment, I'd been playing defense, responding, reacting, trying to protect what I had. But now I saw a way to flip the entire board. I had about $170,000 in savings. Not small money, but nowhere near enough to buy that kind of land outright. But I also had assets, equipment, property, a business with steady income. So I called my lender, laid everything out, and asked the question that felt a little crazy even as I said it. What would it take to buy the whole thing? They ran the numbers, did an appraisal, came back at just over $500,000 for the land. A few days later, they called me back with an offer, loan approval up to $440,000, backed by my business and assets. Now I had something real. So Mark reached out to Evan's attorney, quietly, no drama, no threats, just a simple message. My client is prepared to purchase the entire property. Cash equivalent. Fast close. That got his attention. Evan came back asking $4,560,000, probably trying to posture, make it seem like he still had leverage. But here's the thing. Leverage only works when the other side needs you more than you need them. And at that point, I didn't. Mark countered clean, no fluff. $500,000. Firm. Close in 3 weeks. And then we waited. 2 days later, the answer came back. Accepted. Just like that. No more gate games. No more filming. No more smug little negotiations on the side of the road. Suddenly, everything got very quiet. We met at the title office that following week. Evan walked in wearing the same polished look, trying to hold on to that image of control, but you could see it in his posture. It was gone. That edge he had, completely gone. We sat across from each other, stacks of paperwork between us. 40 acres of land, all of it changing hands in a matter of signatures. No small talk, no fake smiles, just the sound of pages turning, pens moving, and a deal closing. 47 documents later, it was done. I stood up, shook hands with the title officer, not with him, and walked out of that office owning every inch of the land that used to block me in, including the road. First thing I did, I drove straight out there, parked right in front of that chain-link fence he'd put up like a symbol of control, and had my guys tear it down. Not later, not eventually, right then and there. Bolts cut, posts pulled, the whole thing gone by sunset. No more barrier, no more statement, just open road. Then I took it a step further. If he wanted it paved so bad, fine. I paved it. But not for him, for me. Smooth asphalt, proper grading, drainage done right. Turned that dusty little access path into a clean, solid entrance that actually matched the business behind it. 6 months later, I expanded, built a second shop closer to the highway, doubled my capacity, brought in more work than I'd ever handled before. That same road he tried to use against me, it became the backbone of my growth. And the rest of the land? I didn't need all 40 acres, so I leased most of it out to a local farmer. Steady income, no hassle, land stays productive. Suddenly, that problem he tried to corner me with, it turned into one of the best investments I've ever made. And Evan? Haven't seen him since the closing, not in person anyway. But about a year later, I get this email. Short, polite, almost careful. He's working on a new project, says he's looking for about 5 acres of land, specifically, the section near the highway. Offers to buy it back, says he's willing to discuss terms. I read it once, then again, just to make sure I wasn't missing something. Then I closed the email. Didn't reply, didn't negotiate, didn't even acknowledge it. Because some deals don't deserve a second conversation. And some lessons? They stick a lot harder when there's no way to undo them. So yeah, that's how a guy tried to squeeze my business with a gate and accidentally handed me the opportunity to own the entire road instead. Sounds satisfying, and it is, but if you strip away the drama for a second, there's a lot going on underneath this story that most people miss, and honestly, that's the part that matters. Because this wasn't really about a road. It was about leverage and who understands it better. The lesson here is control isn't always about ownership on paper. It's about who controls access, timing, and pressure. Evan thought he had all three. He owned the land, he controlled the only entry point, and he forced a deadline by locking me out. From his perspective, that's a winning position. And to be fair, in a lot of situations, it is. Most people in my position, they don't have the time, the resources, or the tolerance to fight something like that. They pay, they settle, they accept terms that don't make sense long-term just to survive short-term. And that's exactly what he was counting on. But here's where people get it twisted. Leverage isn't fixed, it shifts. The moment I stopped reacting emotionally and started looking at the bigger picture, the whole dynamic changed. Instead of asking, how do I get access back? I started asking, why does he need this land so badly? And once that question got answered, the entire game flipped. This is a psychological trap that shows up everywhere, not just in property disputes, not just with HOA conflicts or land use arguments, but in business, relationships, negotiations, even everyday conversations. Someone creates urgency, applies pressure, limits your options, and your brain goes straight into survival mode. You stop thinking strategically and start thinking reactively. You try to fix the immediate problem instead of questioning the structure of the problem itself. And that's where people lose. Because the person applying pressure, they're calm, they're patient, they've already thought 3 steps ahead. So if you take anything from this story, take this. Pause. Seriously pause. When someone corners you, legally, financially, emotionally, don't rush to respond. That urgency you feel, half the time, it's manufactured. It's part of the tactic. Give yourself space to think beyond the obvious solution, because sometimes the real move isn't solving the problem in front of you. It's changing the game entirely. Now let's talk legal for a second. Real quick, nothing dry, just practical. According to standard procedure, if your property depends on access through someone else's land, you need that access documented. Not assumed, not based on a handshake, not it's always been this way. You want a recorded easement, something tied to the property, not the person. Because people change, ownership changes, and when it does, verbal agreements don't mean much. From a legal perspective, I got lucky in one sense. I had time to fight, resources to push back, and a lawyer who knew how to move fast. But it could have gone the other way real easy. If that emergency order didn't come through, my business could have been shut down before I even got a chance to argue anything in court. That's the reality most people don't see. And then there's the human side of it. Evan didn't start out as some cartoon villain. He saw an opportunity. Untapped land, a business depending on access, no formal agreement in place. From his point of view, it was a clean play. Maximize value, push for profit, leverage what you control. The problem wasn't that he acted, it's how he acted. No conversation, no attempt at fairness, no respect for history, just pressure. And pressure, when it's applied like that, it creates resistance. Because people don't just respond to logic, they respond to intent. The moment I realized this wasn't a negotiation but a squeeze, that's when it stopped being about compromise. It became about outcome. And look, not every story ends like this. Not everyone can turn a bad situation into ownership of the entire asset. That's not realistic, and I'm not going to pretend it is. But the mindset behind it, that part scales. You don't always need more resources. Sometimes you just need better positioning. Sometimes you need to ask a different question than everyone else is asking. And sometimes, the thing someone uses to trap you is the exact thing you can use to flip everything around. So here's what I'm curious about. What would you have done? Would you have paid the monthly fee just to keep things running, taken the safe option, avoided the fight? Or would you have pushed back, risked the business short-term for a shot at something bigger long-term? And more importantly, have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to box you in like that? Maybe not with land, Maybe not with a road, but with pressure, deadlines, or control. Drop it in the comments. I read all of them. Because stories like this, they're not rare. They're just usually not told from the side that flips the ending. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that sometimes the only way forward is to own the road.